Kseniia is a product owner for a data AI-based product company. Well, right now she's mostly working with numeric data analysts, customer insights, and product recommendations. Yeah, previously Kseniia worked at Samsung Research with the biometrics team. She was studying computer science in Russia, Moscow to be exact. She did a little bit of management in South Korea. That's Seoul for those who don't know. And one of the most interesting directions of research, the model, lifecycle management systems, and reproducibility. And that is Kseniia. All right. That's what we got today. This is what we're doing. A little bit of improvisation and spontaneity. All right. Welcome everyone. As you saw, we've got a special guest today, and she's prepared a really cool presentation for us. I will just say one or two things before we jump into the presentation that I know you all came to see. That is, if you're not in our Slack, jump in it. I'll leave a link to that in the chat, or if you're watching this in the future, in the description. And we are also going to be, as the MLOps community, we're going to be partnering with the MLOps World Conference, and that is going on in June 14th to the 17th. In case anyone wants to get tickets or see what that's all about and continue your learning, there's some really cool talks that are happening there, and I will also leave a link to that in the chat / description. And that's all I got, I think. Yeah, as far as the Slack goes, I don't know if I need to really pump it up that much because most are probably in it already. But if you're not, there's some smart people. They're really sharing a lot of insights. They're sharing all of their knowledge with the rest of us. They're generous with their expertise. And there's some cool projects that are sprouting up in this Slack. We've got MLOps stacks, which are it's basically a project to terraform a lot of common open source MLOps tools together. And then we've also got the standardization working group that's happening that's trying to build standards for MLOps. And we've got the engineering labs, which I talk about all the time, but that's a hands-on way for you to get MLOps experience. It's with little cohorts that we launch every 6 or 7 weeks. And that's it. So if you are at all interested in any of that, jump in all of those channels on Slack. And without further ado, I think I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, okay. So guys, let's go back to MLOps. And the topic of my presentation is common mistakes of AI development process. So let's review the process, how I see it. And it's based on the CRISP-DM, is a very old framework, as you might know. But it's renewed with some new functionality. So first of all, of course, we define what we're doing, we define goals, and we talk about the requirements and something like this. Then the second big step is data processing. Data processing is very, very important because it takes 80% of the time of the whole development. Even though this step 3 looks bigger, data processing takes 80% of the development time. When we understood what is the goal of our research or our development, we have to understand what is the data. We have to collect it from different sources, especially for the big companies. It might be like 100 resources where we collect data from. We have to prepare it and to clean it, for example, or to find what is the redundant information. Then we have to analyze the resulting data. on this step, we might understand that we need to clean it up more. Then we go to the prepare stage, or we understand that we don't have enough data for our goal that we defined here. So we can go back to collect more, or we can proceed to the step 3 is training, where we prepare code, where we train our model, where we understand what is the model that we want to use for this particular task. Then when we are ready with the model, we train it, we can evaluate it. After evaluation, we might want to hypertune and train again. And this loop, it contains like, it might take 10 times of the loop, or it will be like 100 times when we hypertune, or even more. So it's a lot of information in this loop. Then when we think that the model is ready enough for testing, we can test. After testing, we might understand that we need more data and we cannot get any better result with the data that we have. So we go back to collection stage, or we can go next to production, where we monitor our models. And this one, of course, it's not this small as it's shown here on the picture, but we will focus
Yeah.
mostly on the development stage. So production, I think, is a bit different process, because it's mostly about monitoring and synchronization. Yeah, and after production, sometimes we have to define new goals, because during the monitoring we might be confused about what we have. So let's go back to the first step. Yeah, so as you can see, the process is quite complicated, because there is a lot of information, and when we have loops, it means that we have many versions. So we have to somehow manage all of these things, and we have to track everything that's going inside the process, so we can be reproducible, so we can automate our process. So I know that right now, most people, they don't face the problems with the process anymore, because the process becomes more mature, but there are still some mistakes that we are doing during those 3 steps. Let's see. First one is planning. The main mistake that's going on this first stage is, sometimes people take personal decisions, and um, it's more than teamwork. So they focus mostly on the personal decisions rather than on teamwork. So what is it? What does it mean? So many people take notes for themselves, or memorize their task, or like discuss task orally with a manager and never track it anywhere, or track it only in the group chat, or maybe on the personal paper. So the thing is, it's not bad by itself, but when you do not share the tasks that you're focused on, it means that you have no task, because if there is no tracking, there is no responsibility, and it might start some mess inside the team, because nobody understands what everybody else doing. It's not professional. It's just easy to lose or to forget. And um, for this mistake, people usually use Jira or Confluence, for example, or Azure DevOps. For example, my team use Azure DevOps Miro or ClickUp, or sometimes even just simple Excel files. But I used to work in Samsung, and many people didn't want to track small tasks inside those tools, because it takes time to create the task, and maybe you think that it's redundant, and yeah, I still remember about this task, I will do it, don't worry. No, guys, it doesn't work like this. Please be sure that you're tracking every task, even if it's small, because in the end, it also influence your development process. I know it's not only about ML, it's about any project, like even if you're making pizza with somebody inside the team, you have to share responsibilities and you have to use those tools so other people will understand what your team members are doing currently. It's also very good if you're a manager or if you want to manage a team of data scientists. So um, if you will use some visualization tools like Kanban, it will be a positive effect for your development team because everybody will understand what's going on right now inside. Also, please don't forget about using some methodologies like Scrum, TDSP, Lean. Scrum may be not very good for AI development, but some people still use it. If you never heard about this, please check out somewhere in the internet because it's not the main topic today. What you have to keep in mind is all team members should understand the whole process and have access to current list of tasks, like for everybody, and for requirements and useful documents, because especially like we talked about tasks, but I forgot to mention that also we have to set up the common goals, that we have to set up common requirements to the model that we're making somewhere where everybody have access to it anytime. So for example, Azure DevOps has its own wiki and also Confluence. So please don't think that it's something not important. It's very important. So next,
Can I jump in real fast and ask you a question on that?
yes,
Because
I wanted to ask you ask questions before going to the
so
next step.
so there is a lot of talk in the community about Scrum and if agile methodologies are the best for the machine learning development life cycle. And you mentioned that you didn't think so. Can you dive into why?
Yeah, because when you plan Scrum, for example, if we take Scrum methodology, um, it means that you set up task list for 2 weeks, for example, or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And actually, if you're following the process, you cannot interrupt this backlog with any other tasks. But during the research, um, sometimes we face some new tasks that appears like right now, and we have to decide if we should implement it right now or not, and it might be blocking tasks. So in Scrum, it's hard to plan because especially in research, you don't know which result will affect new tasks. And that's why it might be a little bit slow for machine learning. Or sometimes you set up the task for like 2 weeks for this research, and you are not able to finish it in this time. So I personally like Kanban. It's more flexible. TDSP is a Microsoft process, but it has, like, if you follow the whole process, it has a lot of documentation that might be a minus here. Also, many people right now switching to Lean. It's kind of a combination of Scrum and Kanban and all of the methodologies. So if you're looking for some good management process, maybe you have to read more about Lean.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, do we have any questions in the chat? No?
Nothing yet, but
Yeah, okay,
I'm
that's
sure
okay.
they're
That's
getting ready to type.
yeah, we're getting to like, I know like many data scientists that are not working with managing systems and don't work as a leader of the team. They're not very interested in management tools or approaches. And it's also okay. We will dive into more technical stuff soon. So second step is data processing, as I told you, like the biggest one. What we have here, the biggest problem is chaos with data sets. And I think we all face this problem if we ever worked with any data set in the team, because we have multiple versions and we do not track it. Sometimes we random distribute it. So for example, there might be two data scientists that have like shareable data sets somewhere, but they upload it to their local storage and work with this. So there might be two different branches of one data set stored on the local personal computers, and it's hard to align those versions or versionize it. So yeah, as I told you, it also leads to data duplication, because sometimes we store version 1, then we make like one small change and it's already version 2, but you duplicate the whole data set. For example, the size is 1 gigabyte, and then you get 2, 3, 4, 5 every time you're making any change and saving the data set as a new data set version. Yeah. So those mistakes might lead to lack of memory, of course, and you will have to buy more storage, which is very expensive, as we'll know, especially lately. I don't know why it's becoming not that cheap as it was before. Um, Also, it's hard to share same versions of data between team members, especially where people working only on their PCs. So for example, you got a very great result on the one version of the data set, but nobody knows about that because the data set is not shareable. It's sometimes it's a really popular mistake in the teams that I used to work with. So for the solution, I would like to mention you DVC. I'm sure that most people already heard about that because this tool is existent like maybe for 3 years or even more now. So they automatically control versions. They store all versions in one place. And what is important, they only cache changes of the versions. So they do not copy and paste same database again and again and again, which is very good for your memory storage. Also, if you still have to work with local storage, usually with your PC or laptop or anything, might be anything, please copy your results of the good dataset versions or final dataset version or something like this to a public network where everybody in the team can get it. So main requirement for datasets management is all team members should have access to all versions of data to improve reproducibility. And I actually want to ask our audience if you have any of those mistakes with data sets, or maybe you have any other solution for this data sets, because I also would like to know that.
Yeah, that's a super common one. And it's funny you should mention that because right now, the latest question in the MLOps Slack in the questions answered chat is a question on I'm evaluating data versioning tools and I'm running into these specific ones. There's Dolt, there's also Pachyderm, Delta Lake, Azure Machine Learning, and then
Mm,
some people put that there's a Terminibus DB, and shout out to Luke who we've had on here before. And then there's also Data Lake, sorry, Lake FS.
mm,
And there's a really cool thread in that channel about the opinions and lack of opinions of all these different tools and what one of them will do and the other one why it wants to go one way and the other way. So I encourage you to look at that if you are having these questions of data versioning, which I
yeah, I
know,
would love to.
yeah, there are. It is a little chaotic, especially when data sets get really big and things
Yeah.
like Git don't hold up.
Yeah, especially when you're working with not only big data set, but heavy data sets like video processing or computer vision. It's crazy. Especially like, for example, one data set version is one size of the pictures,
Hmm.
second version is another size of same pictures, and third version is augmented version of dataset
Yeah.
with some additional but same pictures as augmentation.
Mm.
Yeah. Mm, yeah, okay. I think nobody wants to share their experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Everybody's shy today. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. um, let's go to step 3 then. If there is no questions about data versioning and what to pay attention to. So step 3 is experiments. Experiments tracking was a huge problem like 2 years ago, I think. Right now it's not that big, right? I think many people use many open source tools, which I really proud of. I don't know why, because I did almost nothing for it, but still, I love that people pay attention to this problem and try to sometimes make it better. So lack of experiments tracking is risk to lose good models parameters, and it's hard to visualize if you do not track anything that you're working on. It's kind of same problem as mistake 1, because in mistake 1 we were talking that people track task only for themselves. It might be the mistake that they only track for themselves or just put results on the paper. So same is with experiments tracking. Sometimes people just track it on the paper, and I'm not joking, like in big company like Samsung, I really faced this problem that many teams, they were tracking the results on the paper, like real paper, not in the not in any system, or not even in Excel.
Ouch.
And yeah, like when you do this, I know sometimes it's good, like when you're working, for example, on the university project, you don't really think about it too much. But if when you're working for any production server or any company, even if it's not big, please don't forget to track experiments somewhere where everybody can see this. So when you're trying to track experiments manually, as I told you, it's kind of living in your personal words, and papers and notes, it's impossible to share, especially during COVID, especially when it's online. I know in the office, sometimes people just put it down on paper and everybody could see, but no, it's like we're not in 20th century, it's 21st century. Let's go to electronic version of the tracking. Also, second mistake is even when you use shared docs like Excel or CSV, or you're making some scripts that creates those CSV at, as a file for track your experiments, sometimes it's risk of wrong input. When you're making it like manually, you can forget 1 0, and I don't know, maybe you will just wrongly input the comma, and then the results would be completely different from what we expect to see. And it might also make some chaos inside your tracking. Also, when you're making some scripts, it's hard to implement visualization because you will have to use some additional tools, which is not very good in terms of time management. So you will have to make very complicated systems if you're trying to implement some automation manually. Also, all of this leads to the problem that there will be no common source for checking, and this will lead to lower reproducibility, and also it will take a lot of time for your team to understand what's going on, because the main point of this is people have to, inside one team, they have to have access to all experiments results executed by anyone from the team, because you will have to check what's going on inside uh, other person experiments board, so you can compare your results, or you will be able to ask them for advice, or so you will not make double work, because some people doing this also inside the team. So the results should be also stored somewhere on the team server, not locally on one PC, because as I told you, everybody should have access anytime. Currently, there are some very good open source tools like MLFlow and Omniboard plus Sacred is complete open source, so everybody can use. Also, there are some tools that you should pay for, but they are more mature and they provide you with technical support, which is very great. And it's really easy to implement. If you do not use it yet, please consider to download, and it's just like one command installation line inside your command line and just few new lines to track your metrics or your hyperparameters, because as I told you, remember the loop that we were talking about? It might be 100 times of the hyperparameters changing, and you cannot just have a small memory for it. Yeah. So I just wanted to show you how experiments tracking tool looks like if you never used it before. It's example of MLFlow UI. So there is some dates and there is information about the user who's working on each experiment, the source where you can find the code, the versions, and all the parameters that you asked your model to track for like hyperparameters like alpha, L1, L2, some metrics like maybe some accuracy or R squared or RMSE. So it's like very, very convenient tools to visualize. If you never worked with that, please give it a try. Why I'm so why do I even talk about this, you might ask? Because last year I made this social research where I asked engineers from different areas of application, like there was some CV related data scientists, like some text, people who worked with text, or people who worked just with numbers. So most of them only heard about TensorBoard and only used this, but TensorBoard is a good visualization tool, but it's very heavy and it's very, very slow. And one goes to never heard about this, and this is a list of tools, and mostly people never heard about management tools. And second, like yellow is heard
nice.
but never used. Still, the ratio of people who never used experiment tracking tool is still huge, and we have this small part of people who actually try to do something with the code. Yeah, so if you're I don't know how mature the audience here, but if you never tried any experiment tracking tool, please start right now. Yeah. For a quick start, I actually made this table that compares some features of the versioning and resource monitoring possibilities from some tools from the list. This is some tools that I know exist in at least 1 year. Maybe there are some new tools that I've never heard about it, and maybe they're also great. If you know some of them, please share. I think it's a good place to share right now. Yeah, so as you can see, there are some tools that are commercial, the last part of the list, and first part is completely open sourced, and they have many, many versioning possibilities, as you can see, which is really great. I think I will be able to share the presentation if you will want to work with this. It's okay. Yeah. Also, I just made an example of how you can combine tools with each other, so you can actually make a very good system for reproducibility. So for example, for data versioning, you may use DVC and then also use MLFlow to visualize your experiments tracking. It's a very good combination. Also, another good combination is DVC and Sacred plus Omniboard. Some of my engineers personally like Secret plus Omniboard better than MLFlow. This tool is working with MongoDB. So it stores experiments in MongoDB and then visualize it from there. So maybe if you're used to work with JSON files, or MongoDB is more like you like it or prefer more, you can pay attention to this tool. This is one of the best practices that my team use. So first of all, we worked with Jira and Confluence for task tracking and for wiki sharing, where we shared not only tasks or not only requirements, but also some interesting papers for our research or some processes or just any interesting information that team wanted to share with the other team members. For data processing, as I told you, we use TVC, and this tool is pretty good. They also trying to create some new things for visualization, but I'm not sure if it's working yet or not. For code, of course, we use GitHub. I think most people use GitHub or GitLab, and most people don't have problems with code versioning. For experiments tracking and visualization, we used Secret plus Omniboard, and this is it. We didn't use any special system for testing, and production, as I told you, is not a topic for now. The mistake number 0, I wanted to mention this, very, very important, is lack of information sharing. I don't know why, but people always forget about sharing even small information between each other. Especially it's an issue during online work, because you have to set up a call and you don't have those small talks when you go to the office, to the kitchen, or just drink some coffee with your colleagues so you can understand what's going on. So please, during online COVID season, don't forget to organize more meetings and stand-ups. For example, for a good example, organize team stand-ups 3 times a week. Even 1-2 minutes per each member for status updates is good, because then you understand what's going on. And also, I wanted to share you some more management things is don't forget to define your stakeholders. So don't forget to share information not only inside your team, but also with the stakeholders. You can draw the map of stakeholders, like who are stakeholders. It might be your manager, like manager of the manager, some other parallel teams that are working with also, for example, data and AI. And the matrix shows what is the interest of each stakeholder and what is the power of each stakeholder. So for example, your manager of your team is, of course, you have to manage closely, and you have to take him to those team stand-ups. For manager of the manager, you can make, like, he have a lot of power, but he's not very interested in every detail. He's just interested in the results. You have to keep him here and keep satisfied, and, for example, share information once a month or once bi-weekly, something like this. So if you've never worked with this matrix, it might be a good structurization of the people you're working with. So if you never see this before, please take it as an advice.
Yeah, that's brilliant. One thing I wanted to jump in
Yeah.
before
Yeah,
the next slide. I see a question coming through,
sure.
and Tapan, forgive me if I pronounced that name wrong, is asking, do we use a callback in the code which tracks experiments directly into those tools that you were talking about?
Yes, it's called directly.
Cool. Easy
Yeah, it's
enough.
like after yeah, just see the documentation of, for example, MLFlow. it's just directly like one line. For example, um, I don't really remember the command for this, but it's just one line, and you just give some kind of making a logging for the for each parameter, like for
Mm-hmm.
where did I have this table, like for alpha, or you picking what you want to track. You give the value of the parameter inside the system, and it will show up.
Excellent. I also see Kevin is raising his hand.
So I have been working with EEG data and sometimes audio, which are like just waveforms, right? And sometimes you need to create segments of that data to label it. And my question is if you have had any experience using DVC, for instance. I have seen the videos of the lady, one of the, I don't know if she's the founder or whatever, but she's really funny. But any experience on using DVC with audio data or EEG?
Yeah, actually, I've never worked with audio data before, so um, no, I don't have any experience. But actually, DVC, they have open, um, how can I say, like kind of suggestions. So you can go to their GitHub and
Yep.
track an issue, for example, or some features that you want them to implement.
Yeah.
And if you think that for audio will need to have some additional features, I think they might implement it into new versions of DVC.
Ah, interesting.
They are actually really open for new features, because I personally know some of the DVC developers, and they really want to make their product valuable for the community, and they are ready to develop more features. So if you will suggest them something interesting, I think they will be like, whoa, that's cool idea. We will work on it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because when you have an audio and you have different segments of that audio, training the model with some segments and not others change the
Oh yeah.
performance of the model.
Yeah.
Same as, I guess, when you have a picture and you augment this one of the image, you have a track ID kind of for each of the augmented images, or
It's mostly, it's like not tracking each image uh, directly one by one. It just tracks the, like for example, folder, because images are usually labeled by the folder.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it tracks the whole folder and changes by the name of the picture.
Okay, I
So
see.
like usually the picture has names like numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, we can say that it's ID, I guess, but I think it's tracking by names. Maybe same with audio, I don't know.
Okay, I will let you continue, but really, thank you very much, and thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you for the question. It's interesting that I actually never worked with audio, so maybe I will check something just
And
so like because it's interesting.
I'll give just a shameless plug for the community Slack. Both the founders of DVC are in there, and then a few of the evangelists that DVC has is in there too. So you can just ping them in the community
Yeah,
Slack.
maybe somebody working already with audio and they
Yeah,
can
they can also
consult
help
you.
for
Yeah,
sure. So we've
Thank
got
you.
another question coming through in the chat.
yeah.
And they're wondering, how important is experiment tracking if you are the only machine learning engineer on the team? In this case, nobody else would try to run the experiments. Would simple Confluence documentation be suffice in this scenario, or is it still better to use tools for reproducibility?
So I will answer one by one. first of all, is how is important experience tracking if you're only one email engineer? Well, even if you're the only one engineer, you still have to show to your management usually what you did. In this case, it's easy to visualize what your guys are working on, and it causes less questions by the management than you will just try to explain it orally.
Also,
Uh,
you're the only machine learning engineer today,
yeah,
but think about what is going to happen in 2 months or 6 months. And if you ever need to
yeah,
go back and do a little bit of time traveling and reproduce the results,
yeah.
and it can be very difficult if you're not properly tracking it.
Yeah, like we're talking about like when it comes to MLOps, the main topic is reproducibility. And yes, you will be able to reproduce your results. And also, for example, if you're going to quit the job, you will have to leave some
Yeah.
history. So maybe new person will be able to understand what you were doing, and the company will not spend more money on the new development. Because in this case, like if your model is non-reproducible, why do they even pay you, right? Because there is mm, no reason to pay for the company if they cannot reproduce the results. Yeah. What was the next question?
Would
Yeah,
simple
it's
Confluence
yeah.
documentation suffice?
I don't know. I prefer reproducibility tools because it's automatic,
Mhm.
and it just takes also a lot of time to manually upload every result into Confluence. Yeah, I know there are some integration tools that update Confluence page with some results of some models. I'm not sure, but I think I saw something like this with some tools. There are some integrations, but for me, I think advanced tools like MLFlow, it's not very advanced because it's very simple to understand, are so much better and so much more like easier to manage in the future, especially. As I told you, it just takes like one line inside the code.
Yeah, there's a great point from Udi in the chat. In every project, there's at least one collaborator that is the future you
Yeah,
that is going to have to go back and try and figure things out and piece together all of this puzzle. So, something to
yeah,
keep in mind. And you will thank yourself for it
yes,
later on.
definitely. It's like really, really important.
Yeah. All right. So, what else you got for us before we?
Yeah, I'm actually almost done.
All right.
So I wanted also to provide you with some quiz or test on how to define what are your weak points. So based on the presentation that I showed to you, there are some items like, for example, when it comes to planning, are all tasks are assigned to each team member? Is there a wiki with guides or like any other important information? You will have to check it with yes or no each question, and then there is the results for each yes and for each no or partly yes, because there are some questions that might have something but not really. You will have to rate it with points from 1 to 3, and then calculate the overall result. And most of mostly important, you will see where is a low result and which exact areas you have to work on. Yeah, so I think this might be also helpful for the community.
Yeah, that's awesome. And if
Yeah.
anybody really likes doing that, there's also another great paper from Google. That's the ML test score. I don't know if you've
Oh,
read that or if you got
no,
inspiration
I've
from that.
never seen this. No, I've never seen this.
It came out a while ago, and I'll link to it in the chat. But the ML test score is like there's a caveat to that, which is you are not Google, and so do not feel like you need to automate everything from the get go. And you don't need to get the most mature score. And if you don't get it, don't get depressed. But it is very good to look at just to have that vision on how the top machine learning companies are doing it and
Yeah,
what they are
okay.
keeping in mind.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to rate yourself and to share the results maybe with other people to see, to compete a bit. Yeah. So it's actually the last slide of my presentation. I just wanted to remind you why should we do all of this? Is we will, if we have more automation for experiments tracking, for example, or data sets versioning, it will lead to less manual work, which is almost always good. You will have the possibility to reproduce and compare experiments, which is also very important, as we discussed just 2 minutes ago. Also, it will make your development process more comfortable. You will no longer need uh, to decide what to do with the issues that you face every day. Also, it will lead to faster commercialization because you will take less time on the process and more time for the results. And also, if we will take all principles of the presentation, it will lead to easy communication between team members. You will create some trust, and you will create some great team where everybody respects each other. Yeah, I think this is it.
Excellent.
So yeah, if you will have any questions, please don't mind to send it to my personal email. Yeah, or you can add me somewhere in LinkedIn. I'm also a part of MLOps community.
Nice.
And yeah, you posted
Yeah,
a
yeah,
link
we'll
to me.
throw
So yeah,
exactly. We'll throw everything in there. And uh, uh, now for the last question from me.
okay.
Can you tell us a war story about when you weren't doing any of this, or what happened?
Yeah.
Maybe some problem in one of these development areas, and then how much pain it caused?
Yeah, actually, I have kind of many stories because when I started to work on this topic, it was almost 2 years ago. I've just started to work in Samsung, and we have a lot of like really a lot of projects related to AI and people working with computer vision, with text processing, with numbers processing. Um, I was a project manager, so I had to collect results, but it was so hard to collect because nobody was tracking it. Like that was the first flag for me, like red flag, something might went wrong. So I decided to make huge research, let's say research about how people use automation. Do we have any reproducibility? And this, uh, the last form that I showed you with the questions about the maturity, I created it based on the process uh, like 2 years ago. So I asked same questions to my engineers, so what you guys are doing inside the project, and I found out that we don't do any of this. Like people use papers, as I told you, to track tasks or to track experiments, which was like crazy. They were like, yeah, but why do I need this? I have it here on paper. Like, see, accuracy is 95. And I'm like, yeah, but will you be able to reproduce it if we will need to share it with our other colleagues, like for example to Korea, because Samsung headquarters is Koreans. They have to reproduce experiments on their virtual machines, for example,
Mhm.
or they have to know the environment that you are working in to reproduce the experiments. Otherwise, if we make very cool research, like very innovative, like future, something new, there is no point in it if you cannot share the result
Yeah.
or if you cannot reproduce the result anywhere in the world, because it's not production, then it's just like you're playing in the playground, and this is it.
Did you, when you were doing this research, did you figure out how much this was hurting the project, or how much money potentially was being thrown down the drain because of this, and time being spent on other things?
You can actually really easily calculate the money that you're losing based on like first part of the money is hardware that you're working on. So if your company works with some cloud services like AWS or Azure, like you have calculations there, then just calculate how many hours you spent uh, on on running same experiments again and again. So if you spent 1 week of remaking the experiment that you got achieved last week, but you forgot the parameters that you were working with, like how much costs 1 week working on AWS? I think it's like not that not that little,
Yeah.
right? It's pretty much money. Second point is you will have to consider the salary of the people you're working with. If you're taking time to, for 1 week, reproducing the experiment, trying to reproduce because you don't remember the results. So how much cost the 1 week for one team? So if you have 5 team members with a salary for 1 week, I don't know what is the average salary in Germany. Yeah, it's so you can calculate like 5 people for 1 week, how much they working. That's how company loss. Yeah, and multiply it with the hardware that you're using, and also like if you're not using, let's go back to the datasets versioning. If you're also using a lot of memory, you will have to buy some memory disks or something like servers. So you will have to pay again and again. And if your manager will find out that you're spending his money like this, it's crazy. I would not like this.
Just going around.
Yeah, it's like your data scientists they have a pretty big salary, right? Like more than average people. And it really looks like you're already rich and then you're making company losing money like this. Like you're a rap star in LA.
Yeah, exactly. These are things to be mindful of. At the end of the day, you really want to keep all of that in mind. And there is something that I always say, I feel like a broken record, I always repeat it, but and I missed it on your presentation, but maybe for version 2.0 you will put it, which is the most important and probably most common mistake that is made is not getting the business objective correct.
Yeah, I think this is like number 0.
Yeah, yeah,
As well
exactly.
as communication with stakeholders. Yes.
Yeah, it goes right in there with the communication. You need to figure out who the stakeholders are. You need to figure out what they want. And this is what
Yes.
we've heard a lot from different people in the community who have come on here and presented, is that each stakeholder has their own goals. And so if you can figure out what those goals for the stakeholders are, and it's a little bit like how you drew that quadrant, which I really liked, is these different stakeholders will have their different needs and their different goals. And if you can help them achieve those goals, then you're going to be seen as someone who is very valuable.
Yeah, agree.
And yeah, it's going to help you get buy-in from others in the business. So I really
Sure.
appreciate this conversation and this
Yeah,
presentation.
it was nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I
Yeah.
never expected this.
So thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
This was awesome. We will be here next week and the week after that, where you've got meetups every Wednesday at the same time. Sometimes they are presentations like this, other times they are conversations, and it's a lot of fun. So I may have to start doing the guitar intros for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. That was great.
That was awesome.